I wanted to be a teacher since I was a really little girl. Had got into education and I was working as a school principal administrator, so very busy public servant. And I got to a point where I needed to have some time off. I got quite sick. Tim also had some physical injuries, so he was having to re-examine what it was that he did for a living.
I'd been working in construction quite a bit, like building things and making things, and my body was pretty knackered, so yeah, I was like physically worn out, and Shani was pretty much like emotionally and spiritually worn out, and she just had it. And so we were both looking at making some changes anyway, and then we went to this fantastic talk called Peak Oil and Permaculture, and came out and both of us just went, well, that's it, we've got to do something.
So we sort of made, at that point, a conscious decision that we were going to try and set our lives up to be a bit of an example. The main focus when we started was actually on the buildings, making them as cool as we could in summer and as warm as we could in winter. Put insulation through, photovoltaics. I'll never forget the day we put the photovoltaics on. We still had the old-fashioned meter. The meter runs backwards.
On the old analogue meters, you can look at it, and on a sunny day, the meter runs backwards, which is great. It's a really sort of graphic, physical, tangible thing for people to see and go, oh yeah.
We've got a lovely photo of everyone clustered around the meter, the postman and the guy walking past with his dog and someone pregnant, just all looking at that.
So pretty soon after we started, people started arriving and wanting to know more and asking us difficult questions that we didn't know the answer to. So we thought, well, you know, if we're going to be here and say we're running this sustainable place, we better go and find out more. So we went and enrolled in a course called Living Smart, a little bit making you aware of the issues, but mostly about like personal responsibility and what can you personally do in your life. And it's very community based, getting people to tell their stories and share their stories with other people in that group, and forming some sort of more cohesive group so that you feel like that you're not alone in it.
It really takes people from that end of suburbia moment in a way, so it takes them from that moment where they go, oh my God, what am I supposed to do about this? And actually assist them past that point. There's an assumption when you enrol in the course that you understand that change needs to be had.
And by the time we finished the course, particularly Shani was going, geez, I reckon I could do that.
So we decided to run a street course. I think we had about 30 enrolled out of 30 houses in our street, which is not a bad percentage.
She does stuff that sometimes I cringe and go, oh, that's so cheesy, but it works really well. And it's all about giving praise and inviting people to join in.
So what we did to introduce the idea of the course, rather than saying, hey, you know, the world's going to end, do you want to all join together and help something and save it? We actually had an art afternoon. Everyone on the street came and made a fish, and that was when I subtly went round as people were enjoying themselves, meeting their neighbours, and said, hey, why don't we all do a course together? You know, when you identify a group of people that are the ones that you're going to work with, then it's not so hard to then go knocking on the other doors and say, hi, look, I'm Shani, introduce yourself. And I often take the approach of telling people what we're planning to do and just checking if they've got any issues with it, rather than actually even inviting them to join in, depending on who it is.
We ran it at a local cafe. One of our mates let us use his cafe, which we could all walk to. So at evening, when we went to do the course, we just chuck all our stuff in the wheelbarrow down to the cafe and run the course.
I think what it did is it gave people a focus. So the focus of the kind of conversation and the thinking of people and the sharing that they do became about sustainability quite early on. So, you know, people would be, oh, hi, oh, I just wanted to let you know I had the solar panel guy through today and and, you know, he said this side of the roof would be better. Oh, really? Okay. You know, and so they were sharing still in the same way they might have before, but they had this common topic that they all knew that they understood and could talk about.
Another thing about living in our street, or for us, with us being there anyway, is we have our business up one end of the street and we live in the middle of the street. So all the time walking up and down. So we basically meet everyone in the street. Whereas when we ran the course, we found some people from one end of the street didn't know the people at the other end of the street. So it was kind of a really nice way of bringing them together. And also, I guess, was really kind of inspiring for everyone to realise that they had so many people in the street with something in common and with a common desire to be engaged in that kind of activity.
like a sort of dreaming visualisation session without anyone having to necessarily put their hand up. And I was sort of secretly disappointed, were you?
I was really disappointed actually. About 3-4 months after the course, we'd had all these great ideas and all this enthusiasm, and it kind of, I actually expected it was going to happen and it didn't, and I was like, damn, quite disappointed.
Being the school principal, I thought little committees would form after that meeting, and so would say, well, I'll take this job on, or I'll take that job on. And that was probably our first lesson, I reckon, just in giving people some time as well, because if I went back to that list now, I think that just about everything on that list has come to fruition. Without a single meeting, without a single budget, without anything except for people having a common link to each other and expressing that desire to see that vision happen. The first thing that did happen was the one that I thought was least likely. I remember the little 10-year-old putting his hand up and saying, I'd like a skateboard ramp in our street, and I thought, oh, well, that's never going to happen, that's going to be too hard, and we'll have to apply to council and the rules. And yeah, we had a skateboard ramp all of a sudden in the street, and the skateboard ramp did a really interesting thing to the street because it changed the focus of the street from somewhere that you drove your car down to get to your house to a place that you actually played in. So we actually have a little sheet for each household in the street. It's just got their names, addresses, phone numbers if they're willing to sort of give them. Then it talks about skills and resources that those people have, so things that they're passionate about or interested in, and then skills or resources that they might need. So, for example, no one would buy another wheelbarrow in our street, or no one would buy a fridge trolley, because we know that Brian at 33 and Philippe at 29 have the fridge trolleys, and so if you need a fridge trolley, it's listed there that is who has it. Some
of the resource things are great, like there's somebody who put one of the resources they need is for people to help them eat their mulberries during the mulberry season because they have too many, One of the things that does too, as well as practically being able to share things, is it creates a different precedent. One of the really nice things that's starting to happen in our street is there's a bit of a breakdown between what's yours and mine and ours. It's really common, particularly in new suburbs, that people live in their house and actually build walls around it to make sure everyone stays out. Whereas, well, with the house that Shani and me live in, we've actually designed it completely the other way around, where the front of the house opens onto the veranda, which opens onto the garden, which opens onto the street, so that you actually get to enjoy that kind of whole dialogue and interaction in a casual way with people who are passing.
I mean, I'd always recommend to people when they say, where should we put our food garden? Put it on the front verge. You get so much motivation, so much interest, and from other people being able to see. I mean, people don't wander into your living room and start talking to you about, what pests are on your tomatoes. But if you're out gardening in the front, they will stop and they'll wander into your yard and they'll talk to you about those things. So I cheekily said, well, we don't need to move somewhere else to have more land to grow food. We'll just use that verge land. So it's a road verge. There's a walkway down to the beach and there's a verge there. And one of the things I've learnt working with the Department of Education Training is sometimes good ideas can get stifled if you have to go through the official channels and ask permission, basically. So I put a bed up there, didn't ask anyone. Didn't tell anyone. I think we hand-watered it with buckets for the first season.
And I actually thought it was going to get torn up because it's on a public space and we get quite a lot of vandalism around where we live. I thought, no, it won't last. So we only put in a little one the first year as an experiment, and it went really, really well. And what happened is, rather than people like ripping it up or stealing it or smashing it, people would go by there and pick the caterpillars off the leaves, and you'd be up there watering it and someone would stop and go, oh wow, this is great, like, why have you planted that? And just recently something that's happened that's been really exciting is other people who don't have enough space, some from Duro Road and some from our street, have built their own beds as well. So now, as well as us being up there, there's other people starting to take it on. So you kind of get this from one little dialogue or action, something else happens, and then it just spreads, Open home, first fiesta, second fiesta, and the numbers for that went 800, 2,000, 5,000. It's a bit of a snowball, really.
Yeah, but in that sort of 3-year time frame, it's like an untapped need in people that they don't even recognise necessarily themselves.
I think people really, like Shani said, want to belong, but they're just not sure how it comes to pass. And the culture that we live in really is in contradiction with that, for all sorts of reasons. So I think people want it, they just don't quite know how to make it happen.
I'd say it only takes one person in 40 houses. That's my quote. I say, just find one person in 40 houses that wants to actually start off.
You know, I suppose that's the really exciting thing. That's happening in our community, but it's just an example of what can happen anywhere.